There's one more thing about functions that I want you to note, and that is default values. And we've already sort of had some experience with this, with some of our functions. Remember the center function, or the center string method, where it centers things, or we're using right justify, and I showed you that that function takes a parameter, an optional parameter, right? By default, it uses spaces to move the words around or to justify them or whatever. But if I want to, I could tell it to use periods instead. That's a default parameter or default value in a function. So a default argument like this, or optional parameter, sometimes they're called, is when I create the function, not when I'm calling the function, but when I create the function, not only do I give it a variable name as a parameter, but I also put equals 1. So what that means is, if I don't specify this, if I only say message and that's it, it will automatically put 1 in right here. But if I call that with a number other than 1, then it will use this instead. So it's a nice sort of smart way to build your functions so that if most of the time you know what that value is going to be and you don't want to type it over and over and over, then you use a default. But it gives you the option to change it later. So if I comment this one out, you can see that it says hello. And if I uncomment that, you can see it says world 5 times. It'll say it however many times I want to. And if I want it to say hello 3 times, I would just add 3 there, and it says hello 3 times. But if I take out those arguments, because it defaults to 1, it'll just say each one time. Or I could change the default and have it set 2. Now, if you're using a default argument, notice that message is required. If I don't specify a default value for a parameter, then that parameter is required. There's a required argument that has to be there. I have to give it a message. If I say 5 here, it will work, but it'll just print the number 5 one time, because it'll still work by substituting that in as the message. But if I don't include the message, it's going to be mad at me. So if I say 5, it'll print 5. Oh, well, 5 times 2. Good one, computer. All right. So there it prints 5. If I say, well, I don't want to do a message, but I want to print nothing 5 times, notice it's giving me an error already, but when I run that, I'm missing an argument there that's required. Could I do both as optional? Yes, I could. And then I would not have to put any arguments in there. Okay. And if I wanted to say hi 6 times, then I would say this. I would actually give it the name of the parameter that I'm using and the value. So that gives you a lot of flexibility and ease of use. Do you ever have to use default arguments? No, you don't. But it is something that you can do, and it allows you to do some pretty complex stuff. Let's take a look at even more complex arrangement here. So in this function called test function, I have A, which is a required. I have B equals 5 as a default value, and C equals 10. And then it plugs those in, and all it does is just spits out those values. But there are a number of different ways that I can call that function given what I have there. I have to have A there no matter what. It is required. So there's A and B. In this case, it's going to print C as 10 because that's the default value and I didn't specify it. In this case, I'm skipping B, so it'll print 25, 5, and 24. If I want to, I don't know why I would do this. I've never actually had to do this, but you can. If you want to if you want to call the functions with the parameters or the arguments in a different order, you just have to specify the variable names for each one. This is a level of complexity that is pretty rarely used. You won't have to use this for the rest of this class. But when you're using other people's modules, when you're using other functions, where it literally is a black box because you can't see how it works on the inside, you will see stuff like this. And you will find this useful when you look at the function reference and you see optional parameters. So you know how you can call them, how you can use those functions and put the right parameters in the right place. So it is useful in that sense, maybe a little bit less useful until you get to a really advanced stage of building functions yourself. Okay, so let's